Okay, y'all. So I'm at Fort Washita, and we're at the Ghost Stories. And this is the first group going out. And since it is still daylight a little bit, I thought I'd record a little bit of our ghost stories so you can see what I volunteer at and what our ghost stories consist of. So we're heading out to the parade ground. Alright. So, like I said, this is the annual Ghost Stories at Fort Washita.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for coming out tonight. This is the first night of the many days that we run this week of these ghost stories here at Fort Washita. Sir, how many? Show of hands. How many people have been here before? Okay, under half. That's nice. So, a lot of you in for a really good treat tonight. This place has been doing this since the first group came out here in 1908. That's how far back it goes here. This is, I mean, the fort itself has probably been officially doing ghost stories probably for the last 25 years, especially when this was sustainable. So, as if you've heard from Jim, or you may have come out here before, or you visited the site before, but you've never actually done the ghost stories, well, this is one event that literally sells out every year. First week we started doing sales, we were sold out in less than 2 weeks. So, but thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope you have a lot of fun. We have several storytellers out here, and if you heard what Jim said, this isn't a haunted hayride. We don't jump out and scare you. We don't pull on something and make something pop out of the bushes or anything. These are real stories that happened at this fort that have come down from time, and we share them with everybody. And a lot of people here at the site, you'll get to meet a lot of them. Mr. King Golden, who will be over there in Bohannon Cabin at the end of your journey, has several himself that'll actually harken back to the first story I'm about to tell you. See, his first story actually doesn't start right here at Fort Washita. It starts in a place called Jefferson Barracks, north of here in Missouri. And at that barracks, there was a young officer up and coming, and he received dispatch orders to come down here to Fort Washita to this post and take command of his dragoons. Well, dragoons are mounted riflemen. It's essentially, it's a precursor to the cavalry. And this young officer received his orders to come down here to Fort Washita on orders. And upon receiving those orders, he was a little disheartened. He went to his betrothed, a young, beautiful woman named Julia, and told Julia that he was being dispatched down here, but they had to postpone their wedding. But when he had come down here and he'd established himself, he would write to her, she would come down here, and they would finally be married. Well, not too long after that, he had gathered his men on grounds much like this one in Jefferson Barracks, circled them up in line on horses, received his orders from the adjutant of that post, and rode hundreds of miles down the old military road, similar to the very one that you guys crossed when you're coming onto the parade ground here, all the way down here to Fort Washita. Upon arriving here, he reeled his men into line. They all dismounted, and power was passed to the adjutant officer of the post. He handed his orders over, and as soon as he understood what he was commanded to do, he turned to his men and he got them situated in their housing, which was actually either at the barracks there, South Barracks, or the West Barracks just behind me. As soon as he had his men sorted away, he actually himself went and retreated to his own quarters, which was the bachelor's officer's quarters, which is right there behind you. No sooner did he actually enter the threshold of his own quarters, they collapsed and fell to the ground, unconscious. It wasn't until hours later that his men actually found him in his room, and they picked him up and they took him to the hospital in the northern part of the post here. What happened is he had contracted a very serious case of malaria. Now, malaria at the time was very treatable if caught early, and it wasn't particularly deadly, but he had contracted it on the way down on the ride, and by the time he got here, he was very, very sick. Well, he lingered for days in the hospital, and he had visitors come in and out, his own men checking in on him, but sadly his situation worsened and worsened until about the end of that time, his men had gathered around him, and with his last breath, they said the last words coming off of his lips were, "Julia, Julia." Well, sadly, as he departed, the adjutant of the post gathered his belongings and effects and mailed them back to Jefferson Barracks in Missouri to Julia. And it was said that not shortly after she had received the word that he had passed, that she had died of a broken heart. Now, you'll hear that story tonight, and like I said, you'll hear many stories tonight. And, well, this one will probably be one of the more gentle, softer ones that you'll hear, because, especially the ladies, this is not just a story about ghosts, as it is a story about eternal love. Oh, right. The reason I say that is that the last days of March, and on the final week leading up to Halloween this week, in these last few days, an officer in the front of a lean group of dragoons can be seen riding down the old military road, coming down out of the north and wheeling his men into line and dismounting his horse over by the bachelor's officers' quarters. About that same time, a woman in white will emerge from the west barracks and cross this field right here. And as they get closer and closer to each other, they embrace and they disappear into the night. Now, to give you kind of a rundown on how that story will go, and that, oh, well, this is just another story, ask Mr. Ken Golden when he's over there. If he doesn't share the story with you, ask him about his parade ground story, as he has seen that very apparition. Well, if you'll come with me now, we'll head over to the blacksmith shop.